In this video, I'm going to be showcasing two features of the next version of C Sharp: null conditional assignments and extension everything. We'll be using the C Sharp toolkit on Visual Studio Code for all examples, so feel free to follow along. Let's get started. So before we get going, the first thing you're going to have to do to get this to work as of right now is to go into your C Sharp features, and you're going to have to add a lang version of preview. You want to set that to preview. And that's just going to set up the environment to be able to use the new language features. You actually don't need to have .NET 10 to do this. You can just add the lang version to preview and it will do that, because apparently for these features there's no runtime change to them, but I still recommend just doing it just to do it. So the first thing we're going to be showcasing is the null conditional assignment. The easiest way to do that is to create an object. In this case, we'll start with a class, and the class is just going to be called person, and we're also going to add another property to it, of age. Next, let's create a getPerson function that basically retrieves a new person given a name. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to create a new string called name, and the name will be Joseph. And then we're going to basically pass that name into the getPerson method to return a person object. Finally, we're just going to print out the results. And we will just say that so as a brief recap, we created a person class, we created a person getPerson method which takes a name. We check if that name is Joseph. If it is, we return a new person with that name. And then in our code, we basically make a call to that. And then when that's retrieved, what we want to do is we want to set the age. And then in the final step, we basically run a console.write line, which will basically print the name and age of the person that was returned. And when we run this in a perfect ideal scenario, an ideal world, we do in fact get the response: Joseph is 25 years old, which is what we want. The question that we'd want to ask ourselves now is, what happens if, for whatever reason, getPerson does not return what we expected? So if, for example, there's a typo in Joseph, so I've just added some squigglies here, and I run this code, what do we expect to happen? Well, it's pretty obvious that what will happen is that you will get an error. And essentially, you're getting a null reference exception. And this null reference exception is happening in line 29. So let's go up to line 29 and let's see what's in line 29. Well, what's in line 29 is that we're setting the person's age to 25. But if you take a look at this method here, the results that come back from this method can be two things. It's not one thing. It's not always a person that's going to be returned. It could be a person that's returned, or it could be null that's returned. But in our code, we're writing our code expecting that it will always be a person that's returned as such. Because that person comes back, we expect that we can then set the age. If null comes back, then you can't set age on, or you can't set a property on a null object. So obviously, that's the null reference exception that we are facing here. Now, we saw over here one use of the null conditional operator, which is that even though Joe is null, this will still print. So if, for example, I added that for age as well, and I commented out the age column, the setting of the age, and I run this, you'll see here that it prints blank is 25 years old. So what's been added with this next version of C# is the ability to do that with the assignment as well. So previously, that could not happen with an assignment operator, but now we're actually going to assign, we're going to set this conditional operator on the assignment of age to 25. So when I now run this, you basically get the same result without any failures, right? No exceptions being thrown. Everything just works. Now, of course, what to watch out for here is obviously the fact that if I were to now take a look at this and see blank is blank years old, remember back up here how we had that error and how it told us where to look? It said line 29. Right now, when you use these capabilities, basically, there's really no way to trace back unless you build some guardrails yourself. There's no inherent way to trace back to where the error is. In fact, it's not reported as an error. It's reported from a programming standpoint or from a program standpoint as your code has just run as it's supposed to run. This is intended. There's been no error. There's no exceptions. There's no tracking. So this is something that you're going to have to, if you use this capability, just be mindful of that and use wisely. So the next thing we're going to be talking about here is the new extension syntax and some of the capabilities of it, and again, some of the issues that you might have if you were to use it. So we're all familiar with the old way of doing extensions, basically the way that it's done as of right now. You create a class of some kind, a static class, and let's call it just X. And inside of this extension host, we may, for example, have a method called quote string. And what quote string will do is it will essentially just put quotes around a string that you provide. And what we can now do here is we could, for example, say, let's quote Joseph's name. So it's just called name dot quote string. So let's go ahead and let's look at the new syntax for extensions. So the first thing that's cool is that you just use extension. And then in there, you put in the type that you're actually extending. So we are extending the string. And you give the type of variable name. And then in there, you can now add things that you want to extend, whether they be extension methods or extension properties. So let's add an extension method. And I'm going to just copy this and paste it in there to show how easy it is to switch from one to the other. I'm going to keep the quote string here, but I'm going to add a new one called quote string v2. And I will remove this because you don't need it anymore because the string piece is coming from up there. And you also these are not static, so we can get rid of the static keyword. And there you go. You now have a quoted string v2 that essentially will work the same as the normal quoted string. So in here, I can go and I can do name dot, and you'll see here quoted string v2, and you see here that it's taking an extent that's basically extension host dot extension dot quoted string v2, and you can call it like that. And of course, you can also call it in a typical way. So if I were to go um, extension host dot, you see that I have not only the new way, which is the quote string v2, but I also have the old way showing up here. They are both showing as static, public static functions in this case of this static extension host. Now adding properties, instead of quoting the string, we can, for example, just return the quoted string. And then in here, we can just do that. And over here, we can then simply um, print it. And as you can see, it will function as normal. So if we now run this, you can see here that it's returning us our quoted string of the Joseph name. So this is all cool, but this new extension terminology has one more trick in the bag that I really haven't heard talked about that much and showed in the demo. And I'm going to show it here because it is something that you have to be mindful of in this new world of extensions, because it does expose some capabilities to some features in C Sharp that historically have not had them. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. So if you recall, we've been creating this quote string method, and here's another quote string method. And when we've actually run this code, right, in debug mode as an example, we've noted, of course, that after you call either quote string, Joseph is still uh, the same value, right? This is because this value, as you can see, is being passed by value in here, or the reference to the value is being copied by value, right? So the change that you make here doesn't actually affect that reference that you have over there. But what if we could change that? Well, it turns out that with um, this new extension method, you can make those kind of changes. So I can, for example, put a ref here on this string, and I'll just keep calling that quoted string v2, returns that. But over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to name this as quoted string. Now you're going to see a distinct difference when we actually run the code, right? Because now you'll notice that this str that we're passing here is not a copy of the reference. It's the actual reference, right? So any change that we make to that reference is actually changing the obvious underlying object that it's associated with. So over here, I'm gonna change this to as quoted string, and because there's no other method like it, I can actually remove the v2. And then we can run this again, and you'll see. So as usual, we're seeing that Joseph is the same here. But now let's go on to the next line. So you can see here now that this name has been changed to the version of Joseph that is quoted. The actual underlying reference has been changed. And this is, of course, true for all types. So if I added yet another extension, and inside of this extension, I basically added a do something method. And then once we have that, we basically make it a ref so that again we're dealing with the actual reference to the object. And then here we of course change quoted by basically commenting it out. And we're doing that because of course we know that as quoted string is going to change name, in which case when we call get person, it will return null. So if we run this now, then with this call, we're going to be retrieving the person object, which is basically Joseph with an age of 0, as you can see here. So let's go ahead and let us call do something. That's this do something, which as you can see is going to change the name to David. And let's set the age to 67. So if we run this, and we call do something, if we open this guy up, you now see that the name is David and the age is 67. And of course, I then change the age to 25. And then I call this, and it's just going to say David is a 25-year-old. So this is another problem that might be difficult to figure out what's going on because as with the null conditional operator, your feet can be moved from under you in this case. And it might be difficult looking at this right here to know why Joseph is not what's being returned uh, here, right? Because basically in this line, line 34, before I hit line 34, this is going to be Joseph. When I hit line 34, it's going to be do something. Everything's going to be different. It's a new object instance. That object instance will be different from the previous object instance. And of course, an easy way to show this distinction between the two versions of the object is to basically copy that reference somewhere else. So if I added this line 34, which creates a new person Joe 2 made up of the initial person Joe, then I can do a console write line. And in here, I want to get the hash code for person Joe and person Joe 2. So running this, you can see that basically person Joe and person Joe 2 have the same hash code, right? And I'm basically going to add this again after the call to do something. And we run it again. And you can see that basically uh, everybody has the same hash code. Person one, person two, P1, P2 have the same. And then P1 now changes while P2 remains the same. Now, the interesting thing about this is that because of the way that this new extension functionality works, in contrast to the old way it worked, where you basically had to describe it on a method by method basis. And now there's sort of like this closure, this container that basically holds all the things, all the extensions to that one thing. Then it actually allows us now to do something that you really couldn't do before, which is to allow for the same thing to happen with properties, right? So I could, for example, now go in here and in this quoted string v2, I can also change what the value of the string is. Right? So this might seem somewhat benign, but again, because the instances are different, if you, for example, were doing something related to maybe checking for an object in a graph, object graph of some kind, or looking for the object within a list that's the object that you're looking for, any change to the underlying object you might imagine, of course, will make it fail, right? So anything that's using this get hash code to identify the object would not identify person Joe 2 as the same as person Joe after the call to do something. Right. So what we've created here is sort of like a function to cause a little bit of trouble in the system. And what it does is basically for any person, it's going to return you the name slash the age, but it's then going to change the reference, and then it's going to return my result from the original object, right? So if I were to, for example, call this now, and I'll call it inside of a console write. If I then in here called, you'll find that the kind of bug that this can create is that full ID will have a different name than when you call name, right? And let's run this just to illustrate. And actually, I'm going to stop and comment some of these other things out here. I obviously need the person, but everything else here can go. All right. So let's run this bad boy. And so you can see here that, I'll just go ahead and finish it. You can see here that it's going Joseph as the name, right? That's from up here, right? That's this quoted string Joseph. Then it shows Joseph 0. That's this guy right here. But then when it comes to, if I print out the name, then it shows Daniel, because that's the new instance, because full ID changed person Joe to something else without me doing it in my code. And then down here, it's then using Daniel is 33 years old because that's what's coming from here, right? My Daniel object is what's being returned now. So keep in mind the gotchas that you might encounter with using this capability. And more importantly, make sure that you read the documentation or look at the IntelliSense whenever you find yourself using extension capabilities. Because in this new world, you could potentially have extensions that change your underlying instance, right? As you saw with this example here. A good way to check that is going, just looking at the actual IntelliSense. And as you can see there, if you see an extension method that's a ref, then you know that there's that potential. I'm not saying that the code is going to do that, but there's certainly that potential. And honestly, I can't think really of any reason why that would be there in an extension. That would be needed in an extension. And then, of course, from a programming perspective, as you saw in this example that I showed of extensions, if you're the API creator or the extension creator, you can have multiple extension declarations inside of a class. So you don't need to have everything in one. So try to keep the things that you want to use this ref capability in separate from the things that you don't. So this full ID really doesn't need to be here. It's just a read-only um, property that's returning, uh, that should just be returning this value right here. This is done so to illustrate something. So you would typically take this guy and I could just take him and move him and put them into another extension block that's specific for just a person. And you don't even need to change anything, even though, of course, you should. But as you can see, um, nothing has happened. It's all worked itself out as it should have. And when I run this, you can see that it's now working as it should, even though I'm attempting to change the reference. I'm only changing the copy of the reference that I have. I'm not changing the actual reference. So of course everything is Joseph, and Joseph is 0 years old is what I would expect here. So in this video, we've explored and looked at some issues that might arise with day-to-day programming for null conditional assignment, a new capability of C# 14, and we've also done the same thing with the new extension syntax, which does add some new capabilities to properties and add some new capabilities in general, some new things that can happen in your program, and also obviously added the ability for you to create extension properties. As always, if you like this video, like, share, subscribe. We who are about to code salute you.